welcome to Trust No One, the X-Files podcast, where some of my fellow agents and I discuss episodes of the X-Files. Today we'll be discussing an episode of the X-Files. This is Jersey Devil and first aired on the 8th of October 1993.
I think there's something wrong with your audio.
Sorry?
Annie, your audio, we can't hear you.
Yeah.
Hang on a sec. Let's try that. Hello, can you hear me now?
Oh, perfect.
Ah, there you go.
I'm here. Hi, everyone. Sorry.
Hello.
I was just being muted, apparently, by my very own self. There's something spooky out there, clearly. We'll start again. Welcome to Trust No One, the X-Files podcast, where some of my fellow agents and I will be discussing episodes of the X-Files. Today, we're going to be discussing the 5th episode of the X-Files called The Jersey Devil, and it first aired on the 8th of October 1993. And our first question today is, do you think the Jersey Devil is a feral human, an evolutionary throwback, or something else?
Missing link. Yeah, it's something that kind of mutated from the time of the Neanderthals, and that Mulder finds very sexy.
Yeah.
What was he looking at in that magazine?
Yeah.
Neanderthal porn.
So Chris Carter said, like, the original idea was, what if evolution had provided us with an evolutionary mutation, which is almost a throwback to the Neanderthal, the idea that there's a de-evolutionary bent in nature that in order to survive, we would actually go backwards.
No. Backwards.
That's what she was.
Apparently.
Considering society to today, I can understand why you may want to de-evolve and just go live in the woods.
Here's my thing. Couldn't this have just been somebody that had some psychological issues that was living in the woods? I mean, I know that I just thought they jumped right into it and with really no evidence at all.
That's Mulder.
I know, I guess. So, I mean, I think that it was a great concept. And I think maybe one of the reasons that we were so quiet, and I'm probably just making this up, but maybe one of the reasons we've been so quiet is that I don't think it was done very well. It was a great concept, and it did not live up to what it could have been, the episode, I think.
I think I would call it an epic tragedy storyline. And yeah, it's always been like one of my favorite X-Files episodes.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Oh, I'm sorry.
I think the episode's decent, but in terms of, what is this Jersey Devil, is it a de-evolved person? How far can you take that? How much believability is there? And, sorry, my husband's correcting my grammar. I struggle with English. But when you're looking at a series with sci-fi and fantasy, one of the things is this is one of the few episodes where you don't have, per se, something that is considered science. Again, I can't speak. Sci-fi or fantasy. Is this like a feral human? So maybe this is just kind of, hey, let's see where we can go with this, and it just didn't really work.
Well, I think it established that there's a lot of unknowns and things that we don't yet know about our world and about the humanity. We're still discovering, the different branches of our historical human tree, right? So maybe there's more out there that we haven't discovered even about ourselves.
And I think especially like back in the 90s when it was made, because like there would have been like Last of the Planet that was mapped and everything.
Definitely, and there's certainly cases, aren't there, of children who've been sort of abandoned in the wild and raised literally by wolves or by kind of wild animals, and then when they've been rescued or brought into human habitation, they're very resistant to wanting to be domesticated ultimately, and I think there's something
feral.
there about that.
They're not of us at all. They're their own wild thing. Yeah. So
I guess to take it on slightly from that, then, do we think that you know, it's significant that the Jersey Devil obviously turns out to be a woman. There's the dead man, who's the dead Jersey Devil male who's found. And then what's the importance of it being a woman then?
Yeah, I didn't understand why that was supposedly so important. And maybe you guys can enlighten me on that, because I thought, okay, is it because, ooh, now maybe there are offspring? Is that what that's supposed to be leading to? Obviously, that is what happened, but is that why it's such a big deal that, oh, it's possibly a female? By the way, I thought that was ghastly, that the Bigfoot drawing and then they just put breasts on it. But again, that's just me, maybe. But man, I just thought, boo hoo, that's terrible.
I'm wondering if, you know, assigning a specific gender in the scenes just allowed for Mulder to maybe be a little more empathetic to the beast, especially when he got attacked. Would the reaction have been the same if it was a male? So I don't know if that's why they threw that in there, or if there was something else that perhaps I didn't catch. But that's what kind of clicked to me when that question kind of came up with us, is, you know, male versus female, why? I just can't imagine him kind of gazing at, you know, a male beast and being like, wow, this is absolutely fascinating.
And he
So
does say
perhaps that's-
afterwards. He does say afterwards she was beautiful.
Yeah.
So, Agent Dan, is that why you see it as maybe a tragedy, because it's a mother and then leaving the child motherless at the end, and like, is that the tragic part, or what do you see as? Yeah, I think it's amazing that you love this episode, because online so many people shit talk it. What is
Really?
the tragic?
Oh, right.
Yeah,
I'm surprised
people are-
about it.
Well,
like it
I
too.
feel a little bit better then. I do feel a little bit better.
So
And
what
I'm
was
sorry,
the tragedy?
Dan.
So yeah, I think like the tragic element is the child is left with their mother at the end.
Right. Okay. So maybe that's the significance of it being a female then. I
And
don't know.
also the end echoes the start from a certain perspective, because like the dad is killed at the start, leaving the
Right.
child without a dad.
And it's a perpetuation of the myth, right? It's telling the story to another generation who will then tell the story, and it's parallels this idea of a breeding population of these throwback humans, perhaps, right? That they are able to grow and you know, create a younger generation, which they then continue through the cycle of their you know, foraging or whatever. They get spied, and you know, it just perpetuates the myth.
I think it also left it open-ended so that if they wanted to revisit that at some point, they had that opportunity. So it kind of came full circle, and it, you know, left that door open if they wanted to revisit.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Dan. I think it is kind of a tragic story, right? Because the arc, it goes into this kind of family kind of theme, this story, and we see it echoed in Scully's relationship with her sister, and the whole story that she's pursuing in this particular episode. But the kids at the end, which that's one of my favorite scenes of the whole episode, right? That ending scene where the dad and the boy walk through the forest and the two children are revealed. That's just a touching, very touching scene, and I think it really brings out that tragic element of it, of the whole episode.
Well, like I was thinking, I could see like a couple of other ways that could be considered a tragedy, which is like Mulder's like clearly on the verge of obsession, basically, about this case, and I think like he'd I don't know. I think he'd want to speak with the Jersey Devil or whatever, but the woman is shot at the end, and not much evidence is gathered or can be gathered, I guess, from that. And there was something else which I can't remember now.
Well, is this the first show? Is this the first episode where we see Mulder begin to become worried about someone trying to cover up? This isn't the first time it happened where he says they, are trying to cover up, right? They're trying to sweep it under the rug. That mysterious they.
Yeah, and I didn't think that worked either in this context. I think this is I really do feel like this is a failing with the writing. And I know that it's Chris Carter that wrote the episode. That doesn't mean that it's going to be great. I think there are writers on his staff that are probably better writers than he is. He has the great concepts, but I think this is another failing, that not everything has to be that the police are conspiring to stop this. For what reason exactly? I didn't buy the police argument either, that it's bad for tourism. On the contrary, it would be great for tourism. I mean, tourism is not just the casinos. These things are not mutually exclusive. And so to jump on the police being in cahoots, I think that just did not work either. I think that was disappointing.
But wasn't that the general theme of the episode, that the marginalized get marginalized, the homeless people, right? And the parallel with like this human that's maybe not fully human, also getting, victimized. I think they were trying to do something with that.
I would buy that, but I don't feel like that's where he was coming from.
Okay.
I would buy that, and I felt that it was going to go possibly in a little bit more of that direction, where there would be a little bit more of a message in that regard. And
that's like the other part of the episode that I thought was tragic, actually, like the whole like environmental message, because when Mulder says to the police officer, "Why did you shoot her?" and he's like, "The same reason you'd put down the rabid dog." I thought that was like really dangerous about environmental.
Yeah. That does play into what we might not understand. We want to destroy. Maybe that's where he's going with that. And I do think that's a wonderful concept. Well, not wonderful. That's a terrible word to use, but it's a fascinating concept to explore. Again, perhaps just not quite. It just did not quite gel for me. The entire episode didn't gel for me. I did love a couple of shots, though. I loved when they were the birthday party, because I know you want to probably move on to that question anyway. I love that the first scene of the birthday party is the monkey man. Neanderthal, half monkey. I thought that was great. I loved that. I loved that little juxtaposition. I thought, ooh, that I can get behind. That was clever, and a nice little throw in there about what we were talking about.
I think there's that idea, isn't there, of what do you do when you're confronted with the wild aspect of humanity, and whether that's represented as, the 8 little 6-year-olds running around and it's described as primitive behavior, isn't it? Or whether that's, the cruelty actually of shooting a woman, because she is in effect a woman, isn't she? By the end, it's revealed that she's pretty much human, just slightly different, and all of those beliefs that, well, they're out of control, or they don't fit in, or they're not beneficial to the system, so you eliminate them, you get rid of them, you control them. It's that confrontation with the wilder part of ourselves. And I think when you've got that basement scene and Mulder's literally face to face with her, and there's an interesting kind of intimacy to that, but I think one of the moments there is that she doesn't kill him and he doesn't kill her. And there's a mutual respect there, and there's an understanding there that there is something connecting them, and there's curiosity on both sides. And I think there is that obsession really in kind of modern society of, well, what do we do about nature? We're harming it, but we also need to heal it, but we need to control it. And there's that obsession, I think, of, coming face to face with the violence and the animalistic parts of humanity. And we don't feel comfortable with that on the whole. We seek to tame, or we seek to kill it. And both turn out to be, really tragic and terrifying. And to link that in, I guess, to, the significance of the victims, the homeless population, there is that real overlap, isn't there, between the way the woman is presented as being wild-haired and ragged and a bit grubby, and the homeless men that Mulder gets to kind of speak with and encounter. And I wondered what you thought about that. What do you think about the presentation of the homeless within this episode?
I thought. Go ahead, John.
No, I thought it was accurate. I think that they were trying to make a point there, and I think Mulder made a good point with that, where it's like, if that was somebody else, would you be listening to them? And that, in a way, these are people that are also living on the very edge of society, and how they are discounted, and and we don't do anything about it, or we're just going to sweep them all away and not deal with the actual issues involved. So I think in that regard that it was a good message in that part.
I think juxtaposing the wild man, wild woman imagery of the Jersey Devil in the episode with the homeless, which are the marginalized fringe of society, modern society, those who don't fit in, those who have been, chewed up and spit out by the structures. They're still hangers on, though. They're holding on to that edge of society. It's the rotten edge, it's the fraying edge, but they're still there and they're still trying to engage. Even the homeless man says, I need money. I'm happy to help you, but I need cash. So, Mulder gives him some cash, and the reward for him helping out the structure, right? Helping out the society is he gets to spend the night in a nice hotel room, and he watches.
And he knows what HBO is.
HBO, right? So he's hanging on while the wild man has completely abandoned, right? So it's this juxtaposition of civilized, even though it's a marginalized group, that's the homeless, and the wild man who has completely doesn't have that civilized societal overlay, right? They're living in their own way, and they're, we'd say it's what would it be like, primitive, but it's not. There are structures even within societies that we would say are not like our modern society.
Yeah, definitely. And you picked up that point about HBO. What do we think the homeless guy wanted to watch on HBO then?
Well, actually, HBO was huge right then. So you gotta remember that's everybody wanted HBO then. I remember we waited. We couldn't get it. I lived out in the country when I was growing up, and we couldn't get HBO for like years. Everybody in the cities had it, and we couldn't get it. And so that was a big deal to get HBO, especially if it was free. So
it's really interesting, isn't it, when he swaps places with the homeless guy, and there's that discussion of, well, where are you sleeping? It's like, well, you're standing in my bedroom. It's like, this is the reality of my life. And then I think from that point onwards, we see Mulder obviously becoming wilder. Actually, he's having to live outside, and then he's sort of sleeping rough, and then he's picked up by the police and thrown in the drunk tank. And you've got the animalistic behavior of the drunks anyway in the background. And then he's just looking more and more ravenous when he's taken for food by Scully, and all those sorts of things. So it's really interesting to see how very quickly actually he will just become more and more obsessive and hunting, but obviously not for prey, for the truth instead. So I think there's a really nice contrast there.
I think there was a layer of meaning when the police came and just assumed that he was homeless because of where he was, right? And it was just an assumption. They weren't really interested in finding out anything. They just assumed he was needing to be picked up and cared for and taken off the streets. And I think that's how society looks at people like that, right? We just we as people just make assumptions about everything in our lives, sometimes wrongly, but we make those assumptions, and maybe that's an aspect of civilization we shouldn't be so prone to do.
I think this episode shows us, makes us love Mulder because it shows that he will always stand up for the underdog. Whether it's a while, you know, whoever's being dehumanized, whoever's being dismissed, whoever's being marginalized, he will stand up for. And I think it's because he himself identifies with the homeless guy as a human being, with the missing link as a partial human being. I think he sees humanity in everyone, and I think that that's something that's very evident in this episode, and I think it makes us trust him and like him.
And I think there's also the sense of that he's horrified that because this is perhaps a missing link or something that we would need to destroy it. You know, why do we have to destroy something? Because it's different and because it's natural and it's living. I mean, obviously it's killing people, so there is that. But I think he really feels, and this may go towards why he didn't get attacked as well, is that there was a sense of, I'm on your side. I love you for what you are. And it's not right that we have to destroy you just because you're different or you know, I think I said no.
So to take that step on that, I mean, I think that draws in nicely to what John's saying actually about, you know, belief and it's just the pursuit of knowledge and the pursuit of that kind of the next thing, the next discovery. So Mulder's got that great line about, you know, hearing the story of the Jersey Devil. And he says, I heard that story as a kid. The funny thing was I believed it. What stories from childhood did you choose to believe in?
That the X-Files is based on actual documented accounts, as the start of the pilot says.
Oh no, it is 100%.
Well, it is. Well, I would say like 100%. I would, yeah, like it. Well, like it says, like inspired, but yeah, I didn't think. Now I know that it's not actually, you know, exactly what happened. It is just inspired.
I won't go too deep into detail, but I believed in ghosts when we were growing up. We lived in a very old farmhouse, and we actually did have a lot of strange things happen, which I'm not going to sit here and tell you all of them right now, but we even named, well, we had a name for her because we found out that the mayor of our town, it was his grandmother had died in our house that we grew up in. So I have a lot of stories about that, and it's funny because I'm not really one to believe in that kind of thing, and yet I totally believe the things that happened when we were growing up. So I forget sometimes that, wait a minute, you do kind of believe that because you saw and experienced a lot of odd things. So I guess that would be mine, would be ghosts.
I think I believed in monsters. I was really scared of the dark.
Was that classic monster under the bed, Agent Lisa?
Yes, and to this day, as a grown adult, I sleep with a blanket completely covering me. No hair, no eyes, no toes showing, because I think that protects me.
It definitely does. That's why you're here today.
It does. It does. I love that though. Oh.
Ghosts, monsters, vampires. I had the same thing, Agent Lisa, when I was younger, and I have to admit there are times when I'm not feeling very well and I revert a little bit to my childish ways. That I will still indulge in a little bit of that. But I've been a fan of cryptid stories for a very long time, and Bigfoot and Loch Ness and things that haven't yet been proven to be true. But I believe that there's a kernel of truth in every myth and every story that exists. The floods, right? The biblical story of the flood, Atlantis, you know, all the big classics, Bermuda Triangle, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, can't get any stranger than those.
Absolutely. I think for me, it's dragons. I mean, obviously, there's bearded dragons, Komodo dragons, your usual array. But when you look at the mythology and the representation of dragons across, all these distinct parts of the world that had at the time no way of communicating and no way of, sharing that knowledge, the overlaps in the behaviors and the descriptions are so vivid and so obvious that, yeah. And for me, Loch Ness Monster, it's kind of like a water dragon. So definitely dragons for me, I think, on that one. Okay. So let's think about Mulder now then. So do we think that Mulder goes too far in his pursuit for truth in this episode? I mean, he does end up in the drunk tank. He ends up doing slightly questionable things. He's got absolutely no jurisdiction on this case, as is repeatedly kind of stated. So does he go too far?
No.
Why not? He's obviously a little bit out of control. He's a crusader. I like it. I think it's sexy. But why do you think why do you think he didn't go too far? He landed himself in a drunk
it's not an issue of sexiness for me. I think it has to do with the backstory they've built for Mulder, being fixated on his sister, and that kind of hunt for who she is or where she is and trying to find her. And then he's interested in the unknown because of that connection to his past. And then when he finds out it might be a woman, right, he's completely, there's got to be an association there, whether it's subconscious or not. And I don't think he really gets crazy about it until he's hunting for her in the warehouse with everyone else, and that's when he meets her, right? And he has that moment of, oh, hello, come here often, and her reaction is kind of, there's a history of cross species breeding, right, historically, in our, well, and there's got to be a reason why species A and species B were attracted to each other in some point, right? So, I mean, there's a bunch of things. I don't think he goes too far at all. I think he sees obstacles, and they're unreasonable obstacles, and he doesn't like the police officer, right? The police officer is this cool, kind of arrogant kind of guy who's right and justified in what he's doing, right, and how he treats Mulder, but at the same time, I think it's reasonable. I don't think he goes too far at all. If he'd taken out his gun and started shooting people, that would have been too far.
Yeah, I think for the character, it's not too far. We've already seen that he tends to get carried away. So I didn't think of it in terms of going too far. I just thought, oh boy, here goes Mulder again. I feel bad in a way. Again, I feel for him. He is a crusader, and the truth is out there, I think, is the line, right?
And he wants to believe.
And he wants to believe in everything. But not only does he want to believe, I think he wants to show other people that these things really do exist, and they're not just things to laugh about. And he's so obsessed with that concept that I didn't get the sense that he was going too far as a character. Obviously, in real life, yes, he went way too far, and he wouldn't have been able to go that far probably. But I think for his character, it just fit his profile for me.
Yeah, I think it definitely fits in who he is and the character that they're trying to portray. He straddles that line, though, in terms of professionalism and crossing that line when they're talking about jurisdiction and what he can and can't do. And I felt like when you kind of look at a lot of the things in this episode, it ends up kind of being Scully-centric, and just showing her very much being more in charge than we've probably seen before. And in this particular case, where he's talking to Detective Thompson, and Detective Thompson's, I've been exceedingly polite in explaining to you why you should not be here. Scully is kind of the voice of reason there, and she says, Mulder, we should go. And if she wasn't there, would he have then crossed the line? So I know that it's a TV show and that's the character that they're trying to build. I think in this particular case, he's really straddling that line. And then it, again, it's left open-ended. If Scully wasn't there, would that line have just been completely crossed, and what would have happened? So for me, was it too far, not too far? I think it was right there and kept right there. But again, what would have happened if we didn't have Scully there in that particular situation?
Well, but she did leave. She did leave, though. So he was alone. I mean, maybe that was then ringing in the back of his head that, is that what you're trying to say? Is that, perhaps that if she hadn't have been there at all for the voice of some sort of reason, that he would have just gone out of control?
I think in that particular scene where they're in, is it the morgue, a hospital, or whatever it was, they made it seem like they just kind of showed up. It's like, and he kind of said like, hey, my partner here is a medical doctor and we just heard about your case and we thought we would just kind of take a look. So he kind of threw her under the bus there to take responsibility for why they were there in the first place. And yeah, I mean, that specifically, you are right. After the fact, he made that decision to stay there. But at that point, they said it was the weekend, so I mean, he can do whatever he wants with his free time. But I'm alluding to more with that particular scene.
Okay.
I thought it was really interesting that in this, we're talking about how Mulder may have lost control or become too fixated and going over the top in his behaviors, but that I believe that's paralleled with the behavior of the children in the party. They kind of have that childlike innocence and that exuberance and that energy, and it's not all cake and sugar, right? They resort, boys in particular in this group, they resort to this kind of jump around and kind of express themselves in a very physical and a very boisterous way, right? And I think the fact that in that scene they're talking about Mulder also speaks to the character that Mulder is demonstrating in all the episodes up to this point. He has a childlike quality to who he is and the innocence of how he wants to see the world. And there's that overlay of adulthood and overlay of professionalism, but I think there's this childlike quality, and he pursues the Jersey Devil with that same level of eagerness and energy that a child pursues friends at a party. So there was a nice parallel there that spoke to his character, I think.
I agree. I really enjoyed that parallel, actually. And I think his curiosity comes across as, yes, quite young and innocent in a way. And he's driven by these endless questions. There's this lovely bit where he says, does she feel emotion or does she just spend her days looking for food? And I think that's a question about humanity, as well as just what's that individual, character doing. He's saying, well, why are we alive? What are we looking for? What's the purpose in it all, and to have that sense of imagining what this woman he's never really encountered before is experiencing. He's questioning himself. He's questioning everything, I think. And Scully's going through her own series of questions with that as well. What is she looking for and what's going to bring her joy, I think.
Yes, and isn't it interesting that both of those, again, there are parallels between Scully's journey as it presents in this episode and the journey the audience goes on to see humanity in the Jersey Devil or the characters that are presented, and wrestling with purpose and meaning and emotion and connection and depth. We often think of primitive peoples as, they just have different ways of gathering and hunting and they go about their lives and they're struggling to find food and that's the external trappings, but we don't think about the internal life of those characters, and I think of those people rather. And I think that's what this episode was able to do for the audience, was to help humanize a character that is decidedly at the beginning not meant to be human. It's meant to be other. And I think that's one of the strengths of this episode, it takes us on a journey of kind of discovery a little bit.
Especially like given that there is such a thing as the Jersey Devil, is such a myth or a belief in something people call the Jersey Devil, but that it's a conglomeration of animals, whereas in this episode it is persons, I guess. Regarding like Mulder's determination, I wondered when I read about like the making of the episode, whether it was influenced by a book that Chris Carter had read. No, sorry, an essay. So he said, I read an essay by this guy, E.O. Wilson, who writes about bugs, particularly ants, and he had written a story that posed the question of whether or not man is hell-bent on his own extinction. And then he went on to say that that was what we do to the land, was what he was talking about. So I wondered, like, that sort of hell-bent attitude. But it made sense to me what you were saying, because it is like a trait of Mulder's anyway. The episode builds on that as well.
Definitely. Chris Carter cites that essay, actually. He was a massive fan of E.O. Wilson, who won the Nobel Prize, I believe, for biology. And so one of the sort of main methods of like that essay was all about this idea of when you're the top carnivore, who have you got left to fight? Well, yourselves, ultimately. And that's the self-destructive element, isn't there? And Chris Carter, commented, having read that essay, that, well, what if suddenly, Neanderthals or a Neanderthal-like animal came into play? How would humanity react to that with a competitor, effectively? And Mulder comments at one point, we overpopulate the world and we create new technologies to kill each other with. I mean, if that's not self-destructive, I don't know what is. So there is this huge question, isn't there, of what it means to be human, and how do we navigate the wilds and nature, but actually the truly wild, vicious, animalistic qualities within so-called civilized society. So it's a really interesting debate, I think.
Well, I think that, and I think that also goes towards the idea at the end, where this is not a monster, this is a mother trying to take care of her children. So there is that tragic misunderstanding of the wilds of nature.
On the other hand, so is the mother xenomorph in Alien trying to be a mom, but she was no good. Not all mothers are equal, man. Not all mother monsters are equal, but this one seemed sympathetic.
I wondered if there's sort of like a subtextual sort of coming of age in a way for Mulder in this episode, with it just like talking about wild things. And I thought like about sexuality, where like he's looking through a porn magazine at the start, and then it could be argued that like Brad suggested earlier, like one question is whether during the encounter he has with the Jersey Woman Devil, if he is viewing that through the eyes of sexuality or not.
Yeah, but his response is classic, right? It's a wonderfully set up little moment, right, for the era, right? It was very shocking, because here he is, looking at this magazine, and you'd think that, oh, he's going to get embarrassed and whatever, but he's looking at it like, do you know she says she was taken on board a spaceship? It's completely connecting to his character, but her reaction, I thought, was really interesting, right? Mm-hmm. She wasn't affronted, she didn't, wasn't upset. She just said, well, that's an interesting, just had a matter-of-fact way of looking at it, and defying gravity. Indeed, I thought it was just a very reasonable and mature way of handling a moment like that between those two characters. Porn was porn, right? Whatever. Let's move on. Let's not belabor the point, right? And I think that was an interesting, mature way of handling that moment.
So to take that sort of down the route of kind of Scully's personal life then, and Scully's dating encounter within this episode, which I found hilarious. I think it's one of the best moments because it's so painful in every way. What are your thoughts on how Scully's personal life is represented here, and the date scenes? And we've touched a bit on the birthday party, but that representation of her wider life.
The fan in me who thinks that the X-Files can do no wrong loves this richness that's added to her character. Look how good she is with children. Look, she's able to go on a date, you know. But the cynical part of me thinks, well, it was 1993. Maybe they're trying to take her down a notch and say, see, she's not just this cold careerist woman. She can be a mom. She can be good with kids. She can go on a date. She's a good girl. You know, so the cynical part of me thinks maybe they were trying to make the audience like her. It certainly made me like her. You know, to see her rejecting a man she didn't like. I don't know why, he was a nice guy. To see her being great with kids, you know, I felt very affectionate toward her character from that.
I think
Sorry. I thought that was interesting at the end of the episode where you don't get much of an explanation as to why she's stopped seeing the guy.
Yeah, why?
The guy.
What was wrong with him?
But I then read about the making of the episodes, as I said earlier, and I thought it was interesting that one of the writers said that they had that sort of subplot going on only, and they used the word only to try and increase the sexual tension between Mulder and Scully.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I took it as I took it a little bit further than that in my mind. I thought that this is also showing that she's gotten a little taste of the adrenaline that goes with these exciting adventures, and I'm not ready to give that up. That's what I kind of got from it. Here is a very nice guy. There's nothing wrong with him, but my God, he's boring, and all we're talking about are, you know, and I totally can relate to that. You know, my spouse is pretty damn boring, but but he won't care.
John.
Yeah, he won't care that I'm saying this. I promise.
We're telling him.
Oh, he knows. He knows.
He's watching this live.
Oh, John, check the comments.
But I think it was a kind of a nice way of showing that she doesn't have to settle for us the traditional relationship that she sees now, that there's something more interesting out there, and instead of going on another date with somebody that I was not really thrilled with, let's go investigate this next story, you know. And I thought it showed that she's kind of even more on board with exploring the future.
Yeah, when she took that phone call and it looked like she was caught off guard by it, and you know, he's asking her, you know, hey, I have Scott and some extra tickets. Did anybody else, well, let me back up here. Did anybody else think that, okay, you had one date with this guy and now let's hang out with my kid and a kid that's not even yours?
Yes.
But it's if I'm dating somebody new, they're not meeting my kid for quite some time.
Well, yeah, I was like, hey, boy, somebody's a little desperate for a mother in the house. I mean, holy mackerel. Yeah, I was like, whoa. You just want a mom. You just want a mom for your kid. Right. That's, you know, yeah. I was like, whoa, I would not be introducing already. You don't know anything about her. Yeah.
Right. But with that phone call, you know, she's just she looked almost uncomfortable on the phone. And then, you know, it kind of cuts to the next scene where Mulder's requisitioning for a car. And it's she's almost literally chasing after him in a very sly kind of way and making it look like, hey, you know, I'm coming with you. We're going to work on this together. And again, you know, how they said that they were just kind of increase that sexual tension. I think that's what they did with that. In terms of having that subplot or that arc of her, you know, having a godson, which I don't think was ever even alluded to again during the entirety of the series. I think what you guys were saying with trying to humanize her a little more, maybe feminine. I don't know if it was still early in the series. So are we still trying to establish who this person is, and we're going to see what works and what doesn't work? Is that why maybe they went with some of these angles? I know sometimes they'll put those out before it goes to the general population for viewings and to see how people react to it.
Yeah, I mean, and we're only 5 episodes in, and the writers are still trying to figure out who the characters are. They really are. And so it's kind of like, let's throw a couple of these things on the wall and see if any of it fits.
Exactly. And, some of it was very cringy. Like Agent Lisa said, the dinner scene, it was like a white lace top. It just seemed very out of character. And again, you're kind of experimenting with different things. But I do think there were other things in this episode that did really go along with who she ultimately ended up being portrayed as and who she was as an agent. When they were at the University of Maryland, that professor said, I'm glad that you got more out of the university than just a degree, when she was kind of regurgitating information, just to establish the intelligence that she brings to the table. And in this particular episode, she's actually the one that brought up the story of the Jersey Devil initially at the beginning, which is, if I'm incorrect, you can correct me, different from what we've seen thus far. Usually it's Mulder bringing that to the table, but she had, I guess, found it and thought, hey, you might be interested in this. So again, just establishing a strong female character, in addition to those couple of scenes where we just had some random stuff that, we threw to the wall and it didn't stick.
One thing that I thought really worked to show that she was a little stronger, I thought this was clever, and I liked that they did this, and it's awkwardly done, but I still liked it. You got that moment when Mulder supposedly is jumping out of the window, so he lands and rolls and goes after her, the creature. But I love that then they had Scully do exactly the same thing, because in my mind that was showing, hey, she can do exactly what he can do.
And she did it in heels.
That's right. I looked at those shoes too. Yeah, I was like, man, that would have hurt. But I thought I really liked that little moment, because I thought that's them showing she is right. She can do anything that he can do. And I really felt, bless you, Agent Lisa. But I thought that was.
I muted.
Oh, I know. I was blessing you anyway. I thought that was. I loved that. I loved that little.
Sorry to be defensive. Thank you, John.
Well, I was thinking about how, like, there's one scene where where Scully's asked about Mulder and why, like, not date him or whatever, and she initially says he's a jerk, and then she says, oh, he's not a jerk, he's obsessed with his work, and it's nothing to do with like her feelings about him. It's to do with he's so engrossed in his work. I thought that was interesting.
Well, so that line is typical elementary school response. Do you like so-and-so? No, I don't. He's a jerk. And then it's been, well, not really a jerk. He's just kind of like mean, and then it's typical kind of childlike responses. But the scene with the friend who's the mother establishes first that the expectation on society or from society is that she be a mother. Second wave feminism, right? It's still like, you are okay, have your career, but you should get to having a child and settling down. And that whole exploration there was to, as Agent Michael said, was to help us flesh out Scully a little bit more and give us a bit more of her kind of journey. But I know what they wanted to do was increase the sexual kind of tension between the characters, and I think they established that. They took her out of those business suits and they put her in this very alluring, very for the time period, that tight kind of white bodice top, right? And pants, very very attractive kind of slacks.
Everything was very form fitting.
Would have been a beautiful, very strong yet feminine attire for the time period. But they gave her those qualities as a way to present her choice. That's what I think. It's about giving a strong female character, right? Not that she's just written that way, but rather the character is making a choice in the options that she has. That's what second wave feminism is really all about. And I think that's what, in the era, that's what made the character so appealing to so many people in the 90s.
Absolutely. And I think that's why, Date Man, I think he's called Rob, isn't he? Date Man Rob is so dull and appalling because, at one point he says, oh, you'll understand when you'll have kids. Like, not if, not do you want kids? Are you interested in just that complete assumption? And it's not because he's a horrible person. It's just that complete default, like her friend, of, well, of course, it's great that you've got your career, but, there's more, isn't there? And this is what you're missing. And when you juxtapose that with that line she gets at the end of, like, she's flirting with Mulder, isn't she? And she says, oh, I'll hurt you like that beast woman, if you carry on. And it's like, that's what you want on a date? You want animalistic. You want excitement. You don't want someone going, well, when you have children, you'll really understand the importance. It's like, oh, my goodness.
Well, maybe that's the appeal of Mulder for Scully. He doesn't represent the standard approach to society, to structures, to the world view, right? And I love the end line that she gives him, right? She says, whatever, she opens the door and he says, 60 million years or whatever that line is that he says. And she ends with, and look who's holding the door. Right?
Yeah, I loved it.
And I thought, beautiful, perfect response. Not overly aggressive, very, very, not necessarily flirty, but just kind of fooling around between two equals, which I think was important as well. They didn't hypersexualize their relationship too early.
I agree. It's playful, isn't it? Rather than all out ostentatious flirtation. Yeah. Definitely. To link that kind of into, this theme of children and families, then, that towards the very final scene is obviously the father and son going for the walk in the woods, which we briefly discussed earlier. But then you do get that final shot of, the offspring, the children of the wild woman. What do you think about that choice, and what do you think Cast is trying to leave us with there?
Nature finds a way. Right? Just because we think we figured it out doesn't mean that we have. Right? That's what I think that's meant to tell us. There's more to, and it's hidden. It's often hidden, and it's replicating, and it's making more, and
we will continue to be confronted by it. So we have to answer these questions. Are we going to dehumanize people, or people like people, people like creatures?
I think they called them hominids.
Hominids, thank you.
I don't know. I thought it was also a commentary on, once again, destroying something that was beautiful. Destroying this family. The father is dead, has been killed. Now the mother is killed. The children possibly are just, they may not make it. And I thought it was a commentary on, again, how we tend to destroy these things. And, and you look at so many species that we have destroyed, that have gone extinct just in our lifetimes, a lot. And I thought it was just, a very sad commentary on, here we go again, they may not have a chance to make it on their own. And that's because of our intervention.
That professor scene, right, where he outlines exactly that argument, was really well done. Not in your face. It fit with the narrative, but it gave a lot of good information, and that was a good moment in the show.
And it was good to see that actor too. He was on Barney Miller for years, and so with a ponytail, no less. But yeah, I liked that part too. That's why I was so disappointed with where the episode ended up going, because that part of the episode really built that we're going to see something different than what we ended up seeing. Once again, I have a better appreciation for the episode just talking to you guys. I really do. I've gotten a little more clarity, not even clarity, but maybe just more depth than I was giving it. But I do think that, I love that part of the episode. I also like how they tend to get a couple of hangers-on some of these episodes that come along with them on these journeys. I like that. A couple of characters that do believe the same way they do, and these are smart people usually. And I always like when they brought somebody else along like that. So I like that.
The one thing that, sorry, I'm jumping in again. The one thing that in that scene that I found to be reinforcing of this notion of kind of like society and civilization and the reason people in society or in civilization do what they do, destroy, seek out, but then do it for their own selfish reasons. The professor, he made some quote about, or made some comment about, if we could, I think it was Mulder saying something about, if we could prove that this thing existed and left it hanging, I think the professor said something like, that person would become very, very famous. And it seemed like that was the motivation for the professor to hang on from that moment forward, right? There was no laying of any, like, you'll need someone to come and help verify and track, and let me help you with that. It was just, they ended it there, and then the professor was hanging on as they went and discovered. So I felt that I liked the character, but I wondered, I thought there was room to be suspicious of his motivations.
And I realized while basically he was being a hanger-on, as you say, like the investigation of the case, I felt was portrayed sort of very much as like this is a man's world, and Scully is like the exception to that, because the entire group, everyone else that's with them as they go into like the warehouse where Mulder encounters the Jersey Devil woman, is male.
I think that's an issue with the era.
I thought that was interesting. Well, go on.
I'm sorry. I think, like I had said earlier, with their portrayal of Scully, just having that strong personality, she was the one ribbing Mulder when she bailed him out of the drunk tank, making fun of him, picking on him. Like you had said, Agent Bride, at the end, I'll get you like that beast woman if you keep that up. It made her that very, very strong character. And I just, again, done deliberately. And like you're saying, you had your hanger-oner with the guy from the college. That now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, yeah, why was he there? And your motive that you brought up there definitely, I think, is very valid. Having just all male kind of gender cast parts, we've come a long way, which is great. But having Scully in that, just really, really strong, keeping up with those guys. And in many cases in this episode, she kind of had the upper hand with specifically Mulder, but in other situations as well. So
the coroner was a woman, another medical professional.
I think even if you take it through to that final scene where you've got the sort of wild children under the bridge, you've got two male characters thinking they're in the forest with their backpacks and their path and their everything, just walking right over it. And it's like they haven't got a clue because they're not looking and they're not thinking and they're not feeling. So that idea of like patriarchal dominance within systems, it comes back to our treatment of nature ultimately, in that belief that we get to own it and we get to control it. And, in terms of those patriarchal systems, it's like, well, we're equipped, we're striding on the path to greatness, and screw what nature's doing beneath us. But nature will come back, and nature will come back to bite. And, those forces will rise up, because ultimately they're going to overthrow us all. So I think, yeah, the path of masculinity through is kind of literally represented at the end there as being one of foolish arrogance sometimes, and it's always worth considering that, I think.
I would wonder about the path of masculinity. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit more?
I think just that belief in like that technology and building over nature and believing that mankind is superior, I think that comes from this idea of bigger, better, stronger, and that sometimes is the way that, you know, men are presented as being tough. They're presented as being the ones that rule the world and are right to rule the world. And in the world that Scully's trying to progress in, you know, she's holding her own, absolutely, but she's having to fight every single step of the way to get on that path alongside the men. And so I think the absence of women in that final scene, you know, on the path over the top anyway, is maybe symbolic of that. So who knows?
Yeah,
maybe I'm reading too much into it, but
no, I think that era, the era by itself is the 90s, right? Was and we are really sensitive to those kinds of representations now, equity and representation now. But in the 90s, it wasn't really something that was considered as much as it needed to be. I would say that since the actor who played the dad in the final scene was the dad in the first scene, and the boy from the first scene also played the boy in the final scene, the girl in the car, the first scene, wasn't used in the final. That could have been a good kind of addition if she was also included on that hike. Maybe that's a missed opportunity, right? So yeah, okay, I see what you're saying.
do we feel there were any other missed opportunities in this episode then?
I would have liked to have heard more about the actual existing legend of the Jersey Devil, because I knew nothing about it. I'm Canadian. It's not a famous one from my parts. So I did a little bit of digging, and my favorite story out of those legends is that the Jersey Devil was born of a woman who was tired of having children. She was pregnant with her 13th baby, and she was mad about it, and she cursed it, and she said, "You will be born the devil." And that's the origin of the Jersey Devil.
I thought the whole episode was a missed opportunity. You know, I just thought I was so disappointed when the Jersey Devil turned out to be just a person. I really expected, you know, they set it up at the beginning. It's going to be some sort of monster, and
with hooves and fur, yeah.
Yeah, you know, and so I was just really disappointed.
That's a lot of budget.
Well, to go along with what you guys are saying,
I would not say it's the budget. I would say it's the writing. I think the writing, I just think it falls apart. I really do. Obviously, now that I've sat here for an hour and listened to some of you guys' theories, I get a lot more out of the episode, but just taking it at face value for what you think it's going to be, it's very disappointing. I have a greater appreciation for the episode, but yeah, I was really disappointed.
Fight him, Dan. Fight him. I know you like this episode.
So in terms of the Jersey Devil itself, and this was kind of my little extra X-Files fact today, if you look back in folklore, what the Jersey Devil was originally made up to be, or, you know, the myth of what a Jersey Devil was, it was basically a human-sized vampire bat with a really elongated face. And that's what the actual folklore says the Jersey Devil was. Even in things going on today, the hockey team from New Jersey they're the Jersey Devils. So it's still something that's out there and utilized in, you know, in pop culture. But in taking a look at what the Jersey Devil initially was versus how it was portrayed in this episode. Obviously, two very, very different things. And I couldn't find anything about, why Chris Carter chose to illustrate the Jersey Devil as something so different from what the folklore had originally said that it was. My only thought was, could you imagine trying to make a human-sized vampire bat with an elongated face that you're chasing in the woods of New Jersey? That would be quite the challenge. So
budget.
But that was just kind of a little extra piece of information there.
I did read that he was disappointed with his own, and that hasn't influenced my feeling, because I had already felt that way, and so I did a little bit of digging, not very much, but just enough to read that the writer's room, and especially he, felt that there were some huge mistakes made in the episode, that it just didn't pan out with what they were originally going to go for, and it just didn't work overall. I think if we had called this episode something different, not actually pulled on some real mythology and gone a different direction, you wouldn't have had the feeling that I had, which was, first of all, I really was horrified by, I know I've said this, but the Bigfoot with the breasts, I thought, really so stupid. We've all seen that picture of Bigfoot, that moving to the side, but they've just added a couple of boobs on it. And I thought, that's really bad. And I know that he feels like it just didn't go where he originally wanted it to go. And I think that what you guys have done tonight, though, is show that it perhaps went further than he thought it did, because the points that you guys have all made are so valid about the subtext of the episode. But I know that
we love the X-Files like we love the X-Files, John. We are Bible thumpers for the X-Files. Have you heard the good word?
Again, I'm the new guy.
He's only 5 episodes in. Give him some time. He'll be on board.
Love it.
We will convert him.
So, in my opinion, like, the only missed opportunities I feel there was I still wonder whether, like, the Jersey Devil woman, and basically her kids, at least when they grow up, would be capable of speech or not. I thought that would have been great to have established, but as it is, it's just like left a mystery. Yeah, I thought that was a missed opportunity in a way. But also, I read, like, not only Chris Carter, apparently, John, but, like, as you were saying, I guess other members of the writing staff were frustrated by how the episode turned out. Like Glenn Morgan, I read, one of the other writers was frustrated, and someone was saying it was a story of 1,000 cuts or whatever. Apparently, there was lots of editing in this done in this episode.
I think, John, I think that the showrunners and the writers can appreciate that the audience takes from it a lot of interesting elements, some subtextual things that they may not have, overtly or consciously written in, but we can see the connections there. The one thing, and I would agree that maybe they shouldn't have called it Jersey Devil, because taking on that source material and then kind of pulling the rug out from underneath the expectations that people had feels like a bit of a cheat. But I really wish that they'd set up the beginning differently. Instead of having us in a historical flashback to the Jersey Devil moment, it would have been nice if that had been the story, right, that was being told, because it did strike me as almost not, I wouldn't say satirical, but a little bit exaggerated. The one guy in that scene where they're rushing up the hill, and after they found the body and they rush up the hill and they're pointing into the cave, and the one guy says, he says, big as a house. It seems like an exaggeration, and it would have fit if this was the story that was being told about the Jersey Devil, right? And if they could have worked that in somehow to maybe even the same dad at the end telling the story to the kid, right? And they do anyway, I think there was a missed opportunity there to do something creative in terms of the narrative.
Okay, so to conclude then today, how many X's is everyone going to give this out of 10?
Oh,
how low are you going to go then, John?
I'll tell you, honestly, I was going to come in with a 2. However,
don't cave, John. Don't cave.
No, I am going to cave a little bit.
No equivocating.
And not because I'm afraid of you guys.
Of Lisa. No.
You should be.
I said the quiet part out loud.
I will give it a 5.
Oh, okay.
You guys really have, honestly, you guys, the context that you've given me has made me appreciate it more. Truly, I mean that. So.
Cool. I'd give it a 9. I really don't like the very last scene because I keep noticing how the audio doesn't match with the video when they're walking along and the dad's speaking, and it's like so obviously recorded the lines after in post-production. But also I really like the start, and I do think there's a through line because I noticed like the police officer, he talks about like having seen things like over his time, and I always think like maybe he's like the little boy in the car.
I'm going to give this episode a 6 out of 10 X's. Not the best. Definitely not the worst. I really like how they wrote Scully in this episode. There were some really well-written scenes with the banter between the two of them that just seemed genuine, entertaining, in some cases kind of adorable. And I like seeing that relationship between the two of them, personal and professional, just kind of continue to grow. And, you know, when they were walking from her bailing him out to him getting breakfast, it just seemed like they had really gelled as a pair of actors. And like I said, the banter was just so genuine and it just flowed. And I mean, maybe they had to shoot those scenes 150 times to get that take, but whatever it, you know, took to do that, they made it look effortless. And it was, I guess, those things that to me, that's the saving grace with this episode. The episode was entertaining. Not my favorite, but definitely it's not space.
I'm going to give it the lowest that I'm capable of going. I'm going to give it a 7. I think parts of it were corny and dated and cheesy, but the reason it's not lower for me is because I think it was really well shot. The forest scenes were beautiful. The forest scenes I read were filmed in a remote area that was accessible only using large trucks, I guess because of the terrain. I like that effort. People that work hard for their art. You know, maybe the production value sucked in the early 90s. They did. Okay. Agent Dan pointed out a couple of bad shots, but they did really make an effort with shooting beautiful forest scenes. So 7.
I think it's one of the X-Files' strengths as well, like shooting in Vancouver, especially with all those forest scenes.
I've made a point of bringing up that I enjoyed some of the secondary actors and the way they portray their characters really authentically and really nice. They don't do more than is necessary. So the police officer, as an example, he didn't do more than was necessary. He had a very, you know, business-minded kind of character, and that's what he portrayed. The actor who did that, and I really liked the nuancing that the actor who played the ranger brought. I mean, some of those lines could have been delivered 100 different ways, and it could have been a very bland kind of character, and it could have been fine. But just the choices that experienced actor brought in gave such life to the character. He didn't do more than was necessary, right? But what he did do with what he had, he didn't chew the scenery. He didn't kind of overshadow any moment. It was very subtle, and it was really lovely. So those characters continue to be those. Not all the characters are like that, right? But including actors like that really helps anchor the episodes really nicely. That plus the subtext and a lot of the things that were going on, I would probably give it a 7 as well.
I would like to interject, Agent Brad. One of the things with the character you're talking about, and it's not how he played it, it would have been how it was written. It just came across as a very realistic response when Mulder was pushing him for more information. And he was like, I got a pension coming up in 2 years.
Yeah.
Very, very realistic with that, why people wouldn't want to talk, because it's like they don't want to get cast into a role of, all right, this guy's a nut, we got to get rid of him, and well, there goes your retirement.
Right. But I would agree. The writing was good for that character. But then again, the actor could have presented those lines in distinctly different ways. But the subtlety of the way he did portray them as being sincere to, the uncertainty of the character or the there was just some really lovely choices that the actor made that I thought really pulled out more in a subtle and richer way than a less experienced actor could have done a lot worse in, chewing the scenery and trying to dominate that scene.
No, I agree. It was very genuine. It was very believable. And I think that's a very great observation.
I think I would also give it a 7. And the reason for that is I think that that ongoing kind of tension between the wild, the animalistic part of nature, and how we come to terms with that is a really important ongoing issue. I like the backstory that's brought in with Scully. I like the fact that at every kind of drag back towards a sort of more ordinary life, she kind of looks at it, she considers it, and then she goes, no, there's something more. And so her pursuit of something better for herself and better for society and better for the world begins to mirror Mulder's. And so for me, they're both kind of in the same direction by the end of the episode, which I really, really love. So yeah, thank you very much to the panelists for joining this discussion. We hope you, our viewers, have enjoyed it, and let us know in the comments section what you thought about this episode. Please remember to like and subscribe to our video, and we'll see you next time. The truth is still out there, everyone. See you soon.